Clarifying questions, please.
How did you choose the images that you ended up going with?
There are literally probably hundreds of thousands of propaganda posters that both of these nations produced. There's actually some government sites that collect them. That was one of the ones we used.
So basically, we narrowed it down to the ones we thought weren't the easiest, but weren't like the most challenging. Ones that when you could figure out for the most part, and then when given the whole context, might understand.
What SOL did this cover?
This covered,
Virginia U.S. one.
yes, all the analyzed primary documents,
Being able to kind of apply it in a different direction, interpret, draw conclusions from. And then we had time with the timeline one, which is another part of that, to be able to contextually put them all and understand the different time periods.
So what is your theme and objectives?
the theme is culture, and the objective was to see how these two countries use propaganda to reflect their culture and values.
Or in some cases, the culture that they wanted portrayed rather than maybe the actual culture.
Here's a question that comes up based on what other people have said. So that's your first class. What are you going to change for class lesson for the next group who are coming in 15 minutes or 40 minutes? What would you do differently?
I would maybe mix up the images. Because both of theirs were pretty difficult, and then others got done a lot
We
sooner.
had difficult ones.
So maybe mix them up a little, try to figure out which ones seemed more difficult and which were easier in the class before, and maybe pair them a little, so everyone kind of finished around the same time.
Other clarifying questions, gang? Let's go to warm feedback, please.
I thought this was a really cool and creative topic. I thought you guys did a really good job encouraging, especially with the modified skin scene. I know you mentioned like if you can like adapt it. I thought it was a really great adaptation and still got all the big details that you needed out of it. You did a really great job with that.
Yeah, I personally like what you said, and the way you sequenced the questions and how you wanted us to think about the image. I personally find sort of the basic skin temple to be a little bit cumbersome in terms of writing things down and how you organize ideas. I thought this was very good.
I like that you put the images up on the screen, like after the groups worked, when we were discussing them, so that we can see as a class, and they're not flipping back through their papers trying to find them, because then everyone's attention is at one spot. And then I also like that you provided information about those images once the groups sort of told what they thought the images were saying.
To go off that, like you had the questions on the PowerPoint, you did put them back up once they started working, and they had the guiding questions on their worksheets, just so everyone at all times could find the questions, so they know what they were doing. I did like your closure, and you didn't have time to go through it, but doing activities like that, it gives you something to put around the room and refer back to, so whenever you're reviewing, you can pull in, you've got your examples already around the room for you.
Your directions were clear, meaning what they said. I love to use art and history. That's like what they said. And that was awesome. You guys were able to do that. And yeah, the fact that you put the images on the board, that's very, you can see them hitting right on the head. Like that's very important. It keeps the distractions and limits the distractions. And so that's great for classroom management as well. So.
I also love that you took into account students who may struggle with filling out the SCIMC chart, as we did in here, providing a little additional support for those students on a need be kind of basis. Doing that sort of differentiation within the classroom is something that you could easily give to a student without the rest of the class knowing that you're doing that. So that's always positive.
Well, and part of that too was to make sure two of them were kind of more articles, so they were pretty pixely when you printed them out larger and even on the screen. So just going through, and we had for the two a transcription of what it says in case someone couldn't read it or needed to see it real quick.
Any more? Warm feedback? I'll do my transition then from warm feedback to pushing feedback. So I really liked the thing where you said we're not going to give you any dates because I'd like you to try and place these in some type of chronological order. I thought that was really cool. And then you kind of said, oh, well, we didn't have time for that because I was going to have it around the wall. And I thought to myself, I wrote down, oh, just hand us a chronology of the events that you talk about in the Cold War, based on what we'd already covered, because it didn't have to be a big deal. It could have just been there, and there could have been a few listed, and then we could have said, well, maybe Group 1, where do you think it fits on this time chart, on this timeline? You know, could you explain why? So it's smaller, and then they could have gone big, but it could have been reduced to that. So I liked what you did. I felt like you didn't have to worry about the time. That could have just been part of the material they were given. I also really liked your closure, and how you kind of went something about propaganda does this, and then the arrow dropped down to this, and then dropped down to this, and then you talked about, and I'd written before, why don't you have closure, which is, if you may not draw a propaganda poster, but give them another one, and ask them to annotate, from one point of view, show me what the Americans feel, annotate the criteria of propaganda. And so it could be a bit quicker than just doing a drawing. But I felt like I was on, I kept thinking, oh, well, yeah, time's not an issue because you could have done a couple of other things that could have covered it really well. I also loved this. And I think, though, with an explain demonstrate model, which you did for you just do it, you kind of got people to participate. I would have given this to everybody the first time, just so they had it, not hold it back. You put a lot of work into that, so don't hold back. You giving them a model, because often you go explain, you demonstrate, and then get them to participate. You got them to participate immediately, and then you could have said, and here's some of the stuff that we've just also done, so have a look at this and see how it fits. There's kind of some of the things we're doing now, let's try it with the other ones. So I thought it was a really nice model. So I liked a lot, and then it's just like little small tweaks, so they're not really pushing, but just changing up a little bit, that might have helped, might not.
I'm gonna go back to something David said, or Dr. Hicks said about the time. And I love what you did with the images and then putting the content beneath or the details about it underneath. But you did make a specific point of like trying to put it within a time frame. So I would also want to include that date in the information below the images.
Yeah.
And you did say it, out loud, but just having that for you to reference. And then again, having something, like even if it's just like on the board, you put that Group 1 had images from this time and the main points so that we can sort of see the continuity and change of those images throughout the Cold War and like what stayed the same or what changed from the country's perspectives.
Well, you caught when Mr. Hicks, Dr. Hicks.
How about David?
When he asked the question, what would you have changed for the following? And you nailed it. Like that was something that I kind of pointed out, like at the time, the difficulty level. So I think that's awesome that you're thinking on that level, that you can do that, like right on the spot, and point that out. So that's awesome.
Well, and
Later, in a few seconds.
I liked your little warm-up, the discussion and everything after it. The only thing I might add is, when people were telling you what they thought, I just might ask them why. So you kind of get a feel for what they're noticing in the photo or the posters. So there might be things that you need to point out, to help sharpen those skills and analyzing those posters. So I might just kind of expand that. And I know some groups had more difficult posters than others. I don't know if I would say, I need you to analyze at least one poster, because they'll be like, okay, I did one and I'm done. And then when you go back to them, it's like, well, I need you to do this, do that. And I might, they're kind of like, oh, but you said I just have to do one or at least one. So I might give them like a very specific number and then say, if you finish your posters early, I want you to choose, one more poster and jot down 3 things that you noticed or something like that. Just so they're kind of already aware, you don't spring it on them and they realize that you're doing that just to keep them busy while the next group is finishing up. And then after the analysis, you asked a really good question. To reflect on what the images said about the culture of the U.S. and USSR. might do like a think, pair, share real quick, just since they had that opportunity to go over the posters together first before they had to share in front of the class. It was a good question, and I think they just need that opportunity to kind of discuss with each other first before they're ready to share for the class. So.
Other pushing feedback. Going back to this, I like this, and you've got them for the other ones as well.
They are in the back.
Yeah, I would keep them, and the way I would do it is just thinking about it now is it is about moving around the class, and it's about going to certain people and actually having them yourselves so kids can actually see you've got it, and then going, so what you got? Oh, and then you start comparing it with your notes, so you've actually seen that they've done it. I think it's almost like a performance, and you're going, yeah, okay. Oh, nice, I didn't think about that. Oh, have you thought, look at that, what do you think this means? And so you are having a little bit more of a kind of soft scaffolding, kind of little prompts, helping Brandon along there type of thing. And so using it that way, and then they could all have it at the end as well to compare, but you're using it in action and not just holding it back for, your special one, Josh. And that type of thing. So you're using it with everybody, type of thing, and Jessica and Hilda. So I think that would be kind of nice as a way to play. I want you to watch the video when you asked the great question about paying attention, and these guys, it was on yours one, paying attention to the Uncle Sam and the colour of his beard and all that stuff. Great question. Would have been lovely if you'd have waited a couple of seconds for these guys to maybe have answered it. You just jumped straight in. It's like, what is it? Oh, it looks like a clown. And then it's like a conversation going on with yourself, or a question and answer kind of thing. So just watch that kind of pacing, because it was awesome, but it was so awesome that you wanted to answer it yourself just in case they couldn't. And so just hold back for a second. So it was really, So any more? Sure, picks. All right, talk.
Waiting to answer questions is really hard.
Especially when they're good ones.
It's really hard. I know I taught 2 weeks ago. That was one of the problems I ran into. Because you're up there for the first time and you're really nervous, and that silence is a lot longer than it actually.
A lot shorter than it actually is, right? Is that what you mean? Or it feels longer?
It feels longer.
Yeah, it feels
than
longer.
it actually is.
Yeah.
I was just going to say with the grouping of images, I realized more were difficult than I thought they were, but then I remembered as they were doing them that I looked it up with the description, and they were just seeing it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of realization about which ones were easier and which ones weren't.
And like you said, there's many of them, so you could. I don't think you should shy away from some of the more difficult ones, but there's these spiraling ones that you could do.
Like I thought it was really test our knowledge, background knowledge, and it kind of like, us figure out what students know and don't know. So like if they didn't know what islands these were, they just oh, maybe we should go over more like the geography of Southeast Asia, but we just really
Well, we were talking about this is going to be like before the test or like a day or two before. So they would have
That's
the
like
back.
actually super good, where they basically say harder, which with a lot of, I talked to my cooperative teacher recently about how our school system now, as well, is like no encourage kids to think as much anymore. So thinking and giving these harder opportunities to make challenge them.
Yeah. And on the test, I would have a couple of primary source questions that go to some like this. So it's not just testing the knowledge of the content. I would have that as a deliberate question in there, having them analyse some sources to really make those leaps as well.
It's one last thing that I'm just kind of noticing for everyone generally. Like I know ways we've all kind of explained to you guys objective as well. It would be key or essential question. I think you guys have a guiding question. Like it's not just useful for you as a teacher, but it's very beneficial for the student, for them to see that, because we're teaching is a journey, it's a process. And so it's helpful for them to know like what the point of this is, so that they can guide their way through it and find their way through it at the end. Like you put the question at the end, it would have been also been beneficial to have seen it at the top of it, so they can figure it out, and then now I can answer it, and now I've seen the process. So
What question?
You had the guiding question. I think it was earlier on, but I think what you're hearing is, like, how many effing times do we have to tell you to put the damned objectives up and put the theme up, and that it's not a suggestion, it's a requirement, right? So just drop them in. They're in your lesson plans. Drop them up there. They serve as a signal to your students, they serve as a signal to you, and they serve as a signal to any administrator walking past your office. But they are it's part of the introduction. It's not just dropping straight in. So great, just do it. Here's the question, and this is why we're going to do it, and these are the things that you're going to learn, you know, and by the end you're going to be able to do them, damn it, you know, and that's the kind of message.
I think we did have the question, but
You-
maybe just bring more attention.
Yeah, it gets washed out a little bit. It's like punctuate it. It's a punctuate this, punctuate that. It's that type of thing. So and I think a lot of the comments you're going to get they're all little needly, little picayune kind of comments, which is good. You know, it's the idea of like, yeah, we've got flow as opposed to what the heck were you doing? You know, I mean, what was the point of this one? So the picayune comments that we just kind of saying, this is what you do when you kind of do a black run. These are the things you've got to be paying attention to when you've got your kids in there, you know. And you're going to have teachers who go, I never put objectives up. Great, don't. But in your class, when you do it, you're going to put them up because the kids know where they're going. Yes, I'll turn this up now. Yeah, carry on.
To go back to that,
Right,
do y'all like to put like the objectives like word for word from the SOL? Do you like to rephrase them? What works best for students in that case?
I think I generally would, it depends again on your school, but I would take my objectives that might be similar to the SOLs and say, and put them in your own words, so you're owning them, but they are not totally different from the SOLs. And then you could have underneath the SOLs, if you wanted to say, and this is the SOL we're doing, but you kind of own it.
Really good thing to do for your students. And again, when administrators come through your room to do a walkthrough, whatever it is, to do observation, they're looking for those, and you're going to be evaluated on whether or not you have that listed and present for students. But to have the word for word standard up, but then also to have a more kid-friendly, because that's written for teachers. I mean, it's not written for
Yeah.
students. Like, no student really goes home at night. It's like, let me take out the SOLs and, you know, do some fun reading. But to make it kid-friendly so that they do understand it, especially if you're teaching at the middle school level, they're not going to maybe get exactly what that objective or that standard is. So a blend of both.
It's pointed, like I say, it's about punctuating just certain things that like go boom. So here's today's topic, boom, here's a just do it. Here's the objectives and where we're heading for you guys. And then the other thing I'd say is, my final question is, and it's only because we saw it on the other ones, how could you have, in what ways, and I'm not sure my answer myself, in what ways could you have made this study of propaganda connect to their real world settings or their own prior knowledge?
Brian and I are planning a lesson on has the Cold War ended?
Oh, right.
With a look
Oh, yeah.
on Russia's recent activities, kind of like a current events lesson.
Yeah.
I think we could easily bring that in
Right.
to the lesson.
See, that's one nice option. Cool. And then we also see propaganda every single day, you know, in multiple ways. And, you know, these are just examples of what happened in the past. Here are some examples of what we see today.
Interesting revisit for a lesson on globalization too. Like, what's the difference between propaganda and advertising?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a nice media-related lesson, actually. So, cool. All right, thank you very much. It's lunchtime. Nice job, super guys. I'm trying to turn this damn thing off.